Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another installment of Out in the Woods. It's me, your friendly neighborhood host, Swipe Right, Jacob. Um, and today I have a very special guest that was introduced to me by a very good friend of mine who will remain anomalous. Well, anomalous, yes, and anonymous. We'll call him Dumbledore. Yeah, this is Bill McCarthy. How are you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's jump right in. So Bill, introduce yourself. Where are you from and what do you do?
Uh, my name is Bill McCarthy. I currently live in New Orleans, and I arrived here from Boston, Massachusetts. Like a lot of people, I my first trip to New Orleans was over Mardi Gras, and actually did a little bit of a carpetbagger situation where I had made some masks for a friend of mine who was down here in grad school, and he said, "Well, you should really sell these at Mardi Gras down in the French Market." And so I thought, okay, so we kind of came up with the whole thing, how to do it, and ended up bringing down these masks. We sold out in 2 days. So,
God.
of the 5-day Mardi Gras period. So we're able to play the rest of the time. And we made enough money to pay for our whole trip, uh and you know and have plenty of cash to spend. I mean, the fun thing was I even went home with money, which was a nice situation when you're on holiday.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of the time when my parents go on holiday, sometimes they'll go to the casinos and they'll end up, just walking away with what they brought. So that's, I think selling masks is a little bit more of a surefire way to come home with a profit. Um,
Well, yeah, but you don't know whether or not what you do is going to, people are going to react positively to, your concept either.
That's true. That's true. But yes, audience, Bill is actually from not from out in the woods. He is from out in the bean town. Uh,
It's navy beans as opposed to kidney beans
yeah, as
or
opposed
red
to
beans.
red beans. So when did you know that you were different?
Well, I don't, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly when, but I kind of had a little bit of a charmed life. My grandfather died before I was born, and my grandmother had uh, a business and was politically active, and her work was about 3 blocks from where we lived. So I would get to spend a lot of time with her in her office, and then that led to, she would go to New York 7 8 times a year, and I would travel down with her. And so I got to kind of play in the city. I think that that's part of it, because in some ways she was kind of an Auntie Mame to me.
Hmm.
So it was it was kind of a wonderful life, because I got to travel a lot with her, and through my exposure to theater and all of that other stuff, being in the city, my grandmother was a hairdresser, wig maker, and secretary of the state board of hairdressing. So, you know, think of the demographics. We were always around gay people, and
Yeah, yeah.
and there were lots of people who, had roommates at that point in time, not necessarily defined as lovers
Yeah.
or boyfriends or anything like that, but so I had exposure. Even in high school, I played football, and there were like 5 or 6 of us on the football team that would always play together. Having sex and being attracted to other men was, you know, how my discovery first started. But, I think that when I've for myself, when I finally determined that I was definitely gay, was about 18, 19 years old,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and at that time I had just graduated from college. I guess it was about my junior year in college that I started to identify, that I went to gay bars. I,
Mm-hmm.
you know, kind of dated different guys and that type of scenario.
So I guess in a way that kind of answers, what my next question was going to be, which is, what was your first exposure to queer culture? I think from the get-go it was just not necessarily until I guess retrospect that you realized what it was, because I think a big important thing, Bill, for my audience is that we also have to put a lot of your experience into the context of the time that it was in, because we're not talking 2011, we're not talking 1995.
I mean, we're talking the 70s,
Yes.
which is a very, very different time. You know, it wasn't the 50s or the 60s where it was even more repressed, but it was, you know, it still was one of those things you really didn't talk about.
Yeah.
And, you know, I I was young in high school, young in college. I graduated from high school when I was 15 years old, and I turned 16 over the summer. Because of my birthday, I started early,
Mm-hmm.
at that point in time. And then the elementary school that I went to was like an open school, and you kind of progressed at your own rate and you tested out class by class. And it was pretty much the norm that students, you know, in the 6-year program came out of it in 5 years, so that's where I gained another year. But I was always very much an adult, so
Mm.
anyway, that's how it happened. And I went to a small little liberal arts school in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, called St. Francis Xavier University. And it turned out to be a really good choice for me because it was a small school. Uh, in Canada at that point, you had the option of doing your senior year at a university, your senior year of high school. So um, you would go to college 5 years as opposed to 4.
Uh-huh.
And so there was a younger demographic that was in um, in my college classes and that I was around. So I was only like a year younger. I wasn't like the 2 years younger.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I was a big kid, so it didn't show up. I was 6 foot tall, and I played football all through high school and college. So, you know, I was big and beefy, but a lot less beef than I have now, I have to say, though.
No, darling, please, please. But so I guess when did you end up in Canada?
It started with a fight with my parents. Um, I was accepted to school in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and I even had a partial scholarship to go, and they would have nothing to do with it. Now, at the time, I thought, look, I go to New York all the time. I know the city. What do you mean I can't go?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
uh, later on in life, when you look back and say, a 16-year-old living in New York City is kind of crazy, even if it is in a dorm room.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so my football coach, uh, you know, I kind of confided him how upset I was, and he said, well, I know this sounds crazy, but the school I went to in Canada, and he said, I can probably get you a scholarship there as well. So I actually went to college on a football scholarship, uh,
In Canada?
which is in Canada, you know. Um, you might have a couple of games of mud, but the rest of it was like playing on concrete
Mm-hmm.
because they're
Mm-hmm.
ground was all frozen.
Yeah.
My first weekend at college, my parents had left, uh, and they were driving back to Boston because it's about a 12 to 13-hour drive
Mm-hmm.
to this university. And uh, I ended up, when they left within an hour, there was light snow flurries, and I went, holy shit, what have I got myself into? I mean, the first day I'm here, it's snowing already, and it's September.
Oh,
This is,
Jesus. Oh,
yeah.
God.
But it was never that bad, and I quickly ended up finding the theater department.
Mm-hmm.
At the time I went to school, the president of Theater Canada, which is the Canadian equivalent of the National Endowment for the Arts,
Mm-hmm.
was on faculty, and they had taken the old gym, and uh, upstairs was the gym, downstairs was actually the auditorium and theater.
Uh-huh.
So they turned the gym into an open space theater, and there was workspace there, for us to work on the costumes and work on the sets. And
Mm-hmm.
I auditioned for a show and got in my freshman year, and that's kind of how I got back into theater.
You just
And
you dove head first, yeah.
and it was a great learning experience because our resources in that remote area were pretty minimal. I mean, we were ordering fabric from you know the Canadian version of a Sears catalog,
Um
and just you know having it shipped, and having to buy everything that you dealt with. So I learned a lot of skills that I didn't have because I was working with awful fabrics. And
mm,
it was a great experience. And plus they had rotating faculty that came in and basically did all those shows that were from places like Stratford in Canada, the Canadian Opera,
mhm,
the dance company. So you had all these high skilled people that could teach you things that you know was really invaluable.
mhm.
From when you know I went from not being able to sew to being able to like crank out costumes like you wouldn't believe.
Right. Which will, of course, lend itself to you a couple of decades in the future, which we'll get into after the break. But going back, you mentioned that, you really didn't come out until you were in college. So when and how did you come out, and how did that go over?
Well, i think there I think there was coming out to myself, realizing that I was gay.
Hmm.
That's like one step. And that really happened, in college, that I basically found, I was more attracted to men. I wanted to spend time with men,
Hmm.
that type of thing. But living openly gay didn't happen until I left college and moved to Minneapolis and was working at the Guthrie Theater there. And once again, I was in a very friendly environment because, you know, a huge percentage of the people involved in theater, are gay. So it wasn't
Yeah.
like, and, my first year I had, uh, it was an internship that I had that was paid some paltry sum, and I had to work in a restaurant, nights in order to make things work. And once
Hmm.
again,
Hmm.
the restaurant biz, you know, is loaded with gay people. So it
Hmm.
was just the way it was, like, and the good thing is shortly thereafter, I met someone, and, you know, and they suggested that I do some therapy around my gay issues. And the whole purpose of the therapy was to come out to my family.
Oh.
And so, because at this point, even though my mom and dad had gay friends,
Hmm.
my
Yeah.
grandmother did. I mean, I think actually saying the words would be, like, oh, okay, that type of scenario. But for me, it was very hard, especially at that time, where you have so many friends and so many people that, their families would just have nothing to do with them, after you came out,
Right. Well,
and
I was gonna say, you say that your parents had gay friends and your grandparents had gay friends, but that was, I mean, that was very unusual at the time.
it really was, and my mom and dad were both in radio, and so they were all around it, and and a lot of the talent, at that point in time, there were gay people that were on air. I mean, there was one individual who was gay, was a major in the military,
Hmm.
uh, and was one of their close friends. There was another of their close friends who was a fireman, and he turned out to be my Boy Scout leader, and also someone that I ended up having a little bit of fun with.
Oh my God.
And
He
it
put your
wasn't.
fire out. He put your fire out.
No, he lit my fire. Definitely.
Well, and contextually speaking, culturally speaking, once again, even though, I'm sure this was during, the Nixon era, the cultural mores in America were not very accepting of gay rights and everything. Now, of course, Stonewall had just happened in the late 60s. But you still had the remnants, I guess, of the free love movement still out there somewhere, in little spots, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I mean, and also sex was really easy. You know, I mean, at that point in time, I will have to say, I mean, your only fears were, a venereal disease, um, and mono, and occasionally, hepatitis. But um, those were the things that went on, and there was a clinic
Yeah.
that I have to say, I did visit the Red Door Clinic in Minneapolis once or twice. When I did come out to my family, the reaction was very much like, well, we already knew, what's the scenario. And, it was even to the point where before I had come out to my parents, I was dating someone long term, for about a year. And when Christmas came around, my mom, who was an avid knitter, uh, knit a sweater for him with matching mittens,
Oh
so,
my God.
and he probably over the period of time ended up with, at least a dozen sweaters that my mom had knit for him.
Uh-huh.
That's one thing, like I came up in a situation that was, it was very easy to be gay, and I didn't have to be afraid, and I was also around so many gay people that, you know, I was constantly exposed to all these different things.
Hmm.
When you're involved in theater, there are people from all over the world.
Hmm.
There were designers that were from, England. There were, actors that were from, Central and South America. I
Hmm.
mean, there were all kinds of people that you would meet, and it really, um, helped broaden my horizons. Like I would, um, also, we would talk about travel, and it encouraged me to go off, because the other great thing about theater is that you have breaks
Hmm.
during your career,
Hmm.
and you probably have, a good 6 to 8 weeks vacation a year. So you have lots of time to travel. You've killed yourself, working very hard for, you know, for 8 to 10 week period that
Mm-hmm.
the show was building, and it was time to have a little fun. That's
So it's very heartening, I guess. I guess the best way I can say this is it's very heartening that despite everything that was going on at the time in in the world as it pertained to LGBTQ individuals, that it wasn't something that actually impeded you, and you were actually able to thrive wherever you went, being who you were.
yeah, and I think it had a lot to do with some of my choices.
Hmm.
I didn't decide to work in mid-America, or although I did teach, like a 8 to 10 week class at uh, the Central Bible College in Pella, Iowa, which is probably about as repressed as you can get for
Yeah, yeah.
an environment.
So you saw
But
that
I
and you
mean,
were
it was a
like,
theater
this.
program.
I was gonna say, so like you saw that though. I mean, you went to Iowa, which like everybody out there, Iowa doesn't count as the South, it's the Midwest, but still, repression abound. So I'm sure you went there, and I'm sure it gave you a bit of reflection. You were like, I could have lost the lottery and been born here in this as a gay man, at that time, and just completely, derailed, like had a completely different life.
Yeah, I could have ended up marrying someone, having 2.35 children, and and never discover, my sexuality until I was 50.
Right, right. But here
All
you
that
are.
is. So, yeah, it's a different world. And I think I've been very, very fortunate a lot of times in my life.
Hmm.
So, and, I've also worked hard to make it happen, which
Yeah.
is part of it as well. I've taken risks, and, when I um, finished up college and moved to Minneapolis, one of the sweet things that my grandmother did for me, she said, well, if it doesn't work out, give me a call, and I'll send you whatever money you need to come home.
Hmm.
And it was just kind of that cushion that I never had to use
Hmm. Hmm.
that allowed me to take a lot of risks.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
So
so I guess speaking about, on the same note of taking risks and being comfortable and being very lucky, um, not too long after you graduated, well, I guess within the decade after, there was another significant event in gay history, a very dark time. Let's discuss the AIDS epidemic. What was your experience living through something so harrowing, and what parts of your experience do you still carry with you today, if any?
well, I the one thing, like, I have to say, like, before the AIDS epidemic hit, it was, very centralized in very different areas. Like, it was New York City, it was San Francisco. It wasn't, even though there were isolated incidents elsewhere, it wasn't, you know,
Hmm.
so much where we were.
Hmm.
But, I lived in Boston. I went down to Provincetown a lot. You know, I went to New York and played many a time,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
um uh, but what the kind of blessing that I had was I had a boyfriend for we were together for about 7 months, and he ended up getting transferred for his job. And I was in grad school, and there was no way I was going to leave,
Hmm.
to go out to California with him. And um, so within oh a month of him leaving, um, he came down with this mysterious illness,
Mhm.
and he was going down very, very fast. And fortunately for him, um, they suggested that he relocate from, he was in La Jolla, and get to San Francisco. And he was able to get into this program that at that point in time, they were doing the first of the cocktail combinations of drugs,
Mm.
you know,
Mhm.
and he went from, being close to death's door, to really regrouping, and is still alive today,
Really?
and he became very much an AIDS activist. And he ended up, he works right now for the Norwegian Red Cross, uh, who does a lot of AIDS outreach throughout Africa, Russia, you know uh, and China as well. So he's like
Mhm.
constantly, you know doing that type of thing. And so when he found out, and at that point I thought I was very exposed.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, he said there's a program at the Fenway Health Clinic in Boston, which was Boston's version at that point of the VD clinic, the Red
Mm.
Door Clinic.
Oh, heard.
Yeah, and the Red Door wasn't Elizabeth Arden, let me tell you that. um,
Did not smell
you
very
probably
good.
Well, you're probably too young to remember, but Elizabeth Arden, all of her hair salons had red doors on them. And, it was part of her whole signature of enter the red door, for, glamour and beauty. So anyway,
I've seen Red Door
but that was,
perfume. I've seen Red Door perfume. I don't know if that is also Elizabeth Arden, but
uh, it could be. But anyway, I got involved. I went there and of course got tested, and got tested and got tested, constantly for, it was every month for, a 2-year period. And they also, besides the testing program, they also had um, an educational program, teaching you what sex was safe, what wasn't.
mhm.
Uh, they, I went to group therapy there for about 2 years, kind of coping with the whole thing, because, at that point in time, you would see a friend of yours, and a month later, you'd hear that he was dead.
Mhm.
I mean, it was just happening that quickly. And so, fortunate for me, I, to this day have, you know, tested negative. But, you know, I remember I was really freaked out at first, and I wouldn't have sex with anyone. Um, and, you know, and I graduated up to the point where, I might masturbate if they're on the other side of the room. And then once I felt comfortable, with using condoms, it was crazy. I could open up a condom, and that smell of latex was enough to, get me all aroused, and it became my own little personal aphrodisiac. And to this day, I have to say that the smell of that latex condom really does kind of make me happy.
It just gives you that
Um,
core memory. Yeah, it just it unlocks something
exactly.
inside of you. Yeah.
Well, because it was also, we're all sexual beings, and,
Yeah.
to not be able to have sex, you know, is really difficult. And, and so it was a gradual, situation that I went through. And believe it or not, I'm still involved in that study, all these years later. I get tested quarterly, sent them the results.
Mhm.
And the amazing thing was, I think there were like last time I checked, it was between 65 to 70% of the people who are part of that program uh, are still negative today. So it it worked well, and and I was very, like I said, I was very nervous. And when we were talking, you kind of brought up, you know, how does that relate to COVID? And
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not, um, I think it's very, very similar because, you know, during the AIDS, epidemic, when you saw anyone who had any lesions on their face, even if they had scraped their face, skateboarding or going over the handlebars of a bike or anything else,
Mm-hmm.
you just immediately thought that person, was contagious. And we, you know, and when COVID hit, I mean, it was like the last thing, you had all this time on your hands, but the last thing I was comfortable with, went back to my old days of, you know, being on opposite side of the room with someone, but I
Yeah.
just refrained from having sex because I was terrified. I'm
Yeah.
still terrified of, even though I've been vaccinated, I feel like, you know, in some ways, since no one knows exactly how, like why some people get the disease, some people don't,
Mm-hmm.
like, and I just feel with like exposure in general in today's world, like it's kind of a little bit of Russian roulette every time you go out or, around a lot of people. And there's nothing that drives me crazier than at this point, you know, people who really don't care about one another,
Mm-hmm.
and I hate to say it, but, people with the governors of Mississippi and
Mm-hmm.
Texas opening up
Mm-hmm.
at 100% with no mask mandate, it's like, really, you know, you don't care enough about yourself
Mm-hmm.
and everyone in your life to wear a mask. Like, yes, it is inconvenient. Yes, it's not the most comfortable thing. Sometimes it's harder to breathe, whatever. But, you know, when you think of the alternative with the number of people that have died,
Yes. Well,
you know, how can you do this? Like, how can you not do something as little as wear a mask whenever you're in public?
well, in the 80s, once again, I first of all, I believe that the Reagan administration and the Trump administration both mishandled their own epidemics at the time. And also, during the AIDS epidemic, it was one of those things where it's like, well, we really don't, this isn't really a big public health issue. This is just a gay issue. And then, for COVID, it kind of became a thing where it's like, well, this isn't a public health issue. This is an old people issue. um Even though AIDS is not exclusive to gay men, just like COVID is not exclusively killing old people.
But, right now with COVID, I was old, gay, had heart issues, a little bit overweight. I just felt, I need to do something to swing the balance in the opposite direction,
Yeah,
and take those.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
um well, on that note, let's take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to dive right in to the Gay Mardi Gras. And we're back with the Bill McCarthy, costumer extraordinaire, interior designer extraordinaire, and just all around fun guest to talk to. So Bill, we talked about your origin story. You've been everywhere, Boston, Minneapolis, Canada. And then, briefly when you first introduced yourself, you talked about, a couple of decades ago, ending up in New Orleans for Mardi Gras. So what kept you in New Orleans and how are you still there today?
well, first time I came down, it was 5 days, over Mardi Gras, and I actually stayed at the Y at Lee Circle. And I remember that, you know, and this really wasn't that long ago, but it was $59 was my total lodging bill. And,
Mm.
and they were, apologizing for having the rates go up during Mardi Gras. So I think at that point in time, I mean, you could probably stay at $8 a night at the Y, and
Uh,
they had to go up to 10. I mean, that it was crazy. And and you know think about it, it was a great place to experience Mardi Gras because here you had a bathroom right on a parade route.
uh-huh.
You weren't that far away from the French Quarter, like you're 10 blocks from the quarter. And and the Ys at that time were very sexually active.
Well, the Village people were literally broadcasting it, or had been broadcasting it. So, I mean, it's yeah, yeah. And for $8 a night to get, to get your business done, absolutely, absolutely.
Well,
And
you had a room with a bed, you know, with a lock on the door, and you were able to shower and, you know,
yeah.
swim if you wanted to. It was great. And so much so that the next year I stayed 2 weeks,
Hmm.
and there, and once again because it was so inexpensive. And I think that there was even an option that they gave you some sort of meal, was whether it was breakfast or not. I don't remember. I never, was
Hmm.
never up in time to take advantage of it.
Same.
Um, but then the following year, I it coincided with a lot of time off, and I just decided I'm going to go down for a month.
Hmm.
So I was down here for a month, and I met a lot of people during that time. And um, over the course of the summer, one of the people that I had met, suggested that um, they had found this place, and did I want to go in and rent it? And it was basically going to cost $1,000 a year for my share of this. So,
Hmm.
and it was a 4-bedroom place, and there was a living room with a hide-a-bed in it. So we all had our own rooms, and was able to come down to New Orleans, anytime I had time off, be here for all the high holidays, like
Hmm.
come down for Halloween, New Year's, whenever I wanted to. Um, and so that started my New Orleans experience.
Hmm.
And we rented that place for about 3 years, and then I ended up buying a place of my own down here, and it was a tiny little studio. And
Hmm.
uh, from there, you know, I had the people that I was working for at the CBC in Toronto that I was working with.
Hmm.
We had all decided that we'll do an extra film in a short period of time with serious overlaps where it would be absolutely crazy, but we did it anyway. And we're going to take 6 months off.
Mm.
And they were going spelunking somewhere, and I decided, well, I'm going to go down to New Orleans.
Nice and warm
And exactly, because this started in December. So friends of mine were going through a renovation of their space, and they wanted, you know, I'd arranged to rent them my condo in Boston. Well, like all renovations, they go on forever.
there. Hmm.
And it was, you know, in June that we had a discussion, and they said, well, is there any chance that we can stay a little bit longer because the construction isn't done? And at this point, what they were paying me was paying all my bills in Boston, plus paying for my rent in New Orleans. So it was like, okay, I can do this. And it was June, and I had made it through, like my first part of a southern summer. And I'm going, well, this is a little oppressive, but it's not bad. And, thinking that it's like Boston where, you know, when August hits, you start wearing a sweatshirt. So I thought I only had 2 months, never realizing that, you know,
Oh yeah.
it was going to be October before, the weather would break. But,
Yeah.
it's like anything, you get used to it. And now I firmly believe a southern summer is a lot easier than a northern winter.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I would
so,
imagine. There's a lot less prep that goes into Southern Summer. Southern Summer, you're just gonna be here and you're gonna suffer and you're gonna sweat. With Northern Winter, it's like you gotta get these special tires and you gotta, make sure the pipes don't freeze and you gotta, so much work that we don't have time for down here in the South. Now, speaking of which, New Orleans, as all of my guests will tell you, especially the ones from Louisiana, New Orleans is its own beast when it comes to, Louisiana, but the South in general. Have you ever traveled outside of New Orleans at any point, but stayed within the South and actually gotten a taste of like real like Southern culture? And if you have, how does it stack up against everywhere else?
well, you know, I think it's like rural America no matter where you go, but
Mm.
you know, there's also, I hate to say it, the extreme redneck factor. You know, I grew up in cities. My whole adult life, I've lived in a city. So when I go somewhere rural, I'm not in my comfort zone.
Hmm. Hmm.
Rural for me is going to the beach at Pensacola. And
Oh.
even that, is not full exposure. But I have done work, in Biloxi, in Georgia,
Hmm.
in Franklinton, Tennessee,
Hmm.
so I've been over the South and have traveled and and even evacuated for hurricanes and explored different areas like going to beautiful Jackson, Mississippi, and going to Memphis, Tennessee, for that.
Hmm.
And post Katrina, I actually, as Katrina was coming up, I had a lot of work in Houston, so I
Hmm.
bought a place there. So I was back and forth between Houston, and New Orleans. So I have been around a lot of the South, but you know, have besides like one week weekend that I spent in Wiggins, Mississippi, at state park there. uh, but there were 8 of us that rented this cabin, and it was kind of fun. So we brought our own gayness with us.
You turned it into a
So
camp.
that
I mean,
was
you were camping at that point.
exactly, yeah. And we did that a couple of times, and we would actually even after Mardi Gras with my group of friends, we would always you know have what we first called our Betty Ford Richard Simmons days, where the Wednesday after Mardi Gras we'd go on our Bloody Mary tour and go from bar to bar and hear everyone's stories or things
Hmm.
that we did from the bartenders.
Hmm.
Um, one time I lost a camera, and I had taken a picture of this guy's penis that I put into a Lucky Dog bun. Well, it gets better because I also put mustard on the person's penis that I was in the hot dog bun in the pictures, and may or may not have sampled.
Ooh, well, what else would
But
I was gonna say, why would you not? But anyway.
exactly. And so a year later, I'm sitting having a drink in the bar, and the bartender goes, "I found your camera. I have pictures of you. Uh, you know, I'll bring it in tomorrow for you." and he brought it in and the pictures were all developed, so that was kind of a fun little story of how things can happen and how you can, you know you never know who you're going to meet and how you can end up meeting them the following year or that because there are people who only come to town during Mardi Gras,
Yeah.
and I have I have like serious Mardi Gras friends that I only get to see at this time of year.
Well, on that note, let's talk about Gay Mardi Gras. So, Bill, for my audience and I guess for me, what are the ins and outs of Gay Mardi Gras? What are the traditions and what is the structure?
Well, I mean, Gay Mardi Gras started out as a time of survival. Uh, the first gay balls were held in 1962.
Hmm.
And at that point in time, the crew of Petronius and the crew of Yuga both had balls uh, at what they called the Rambler Room. And here's actually an invitation from the crew of Petronius ball from 1962.
That's incredible.
And and they uh, it turned out Petronius went first. Everything went fine. Then the next Saturday night when Yuga had their ball, it was actually it was raided, and the guys, there were a lot of people who just ran through people's yards. Some people would hide them, other people would report them,
Uh-huh.
but it ended up with a great deal of arrests of those individuals, and they actually put the pictures of them on the front page of the paper
Mm.
uh, with their name, where they were from, and where they worked. So, um, and what's kind of interesting is there was in New Orleans, where the Cat's Meow is now, there was a bar called it was Dixie's.
Hmm.
And Miss Dixie, that was where, it was the gay bar where you would go, and the police were always having all kinds of decoys in there. So, because if you touched another man, they would, arrest you. If you danced with
Mm.
another man, they would arrest you. So they developed a system where they would flip on a light off and on to let you know whether there were police in the bar or not. Because you couldn't even go up and greet someone, hug them, and give them a kiss. I mean,
Hmm.
it wasn't allowed at that point in time. But Miss Dixie was nice enough to take the money that she had in the safe and go bail everyone out.
God. Wow. So she was invited to every ball after that, I'm sure.
Yes, and especially within the crew of Petronius, Miss Dixie is, always a legend, always someone that's talked about,
Hmm.
But the reason why gay balls came into being was that, um, you know, it wasn't safe to go to the bar. So these groups of people would rent a space. Sometimes it would be nothing more than someone's home
Hmm.
that they called their dens, and they would go there and they would meet one day a week, and it was a safe outlet because you know it wasn't identified as a gay bar, and they could go in and have fun, have a few drinks, have a few laughs, work on their costumes all year long. And that was kind of the tradition
Hmm.
of how the balls, developed. And, you know, the balls got bigger and bigger. There were more crews. The 90s hit, there were less crews because of, the AIDS epidemic and wiping them out.
Hmm.
And now there are like 5 Mardi Gras crews at this point. The crew of Petronius is the oldest. Then it's the crew of Amun Ra
Hmm.
and the crew of Arminius came shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
So all in all, the crews have, um, they basically, you know, within any organization, there are always fractions. There was a split off of a group of people that would start their own crew.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how it happened. But um, on Mardi Gras Day, it was safe to dress as a woman
Mm-hmm.
as long as you had one piece of men's clothing on. So, you go out and be all dressed with your nylons and still have your jockey shorts on, something along those lines.
Oh my God.
Because on Mardi Gras Day, they wouldn't arrest you for being in drag and impersonating a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So, but through the another interesting story about Gay Mardi Gras and the place that it posed in history. Um, during You're probably familiar with who Clay Shaw is, and boy, now I'll have to.
Hold
Um,
on. I'm gonna ask Google. You said Clay Shaw?
Clay Shaw was a gay man who lived in the quarter, who renovated a lot of properties, was very active in creating the Vieux Commission, which is
Oh.
the governing agency that keeps the French Quarter, you know, intact. And he also was on the board of the World Trade Center,
Oh.
and where they're now converting that building into a Four Seasons hotel. But he was responsible. I mean, that building is a compass, and he was responsible for doing that.
Mm.
But he was also um, he was called into court. If you've ever seen the movie JFK, uh, it talks about Jim Garrison, who was the district attorney of New Orleans at that point in time, coming after Clay Shaw because Lee Harvey Oswald was seen in the company of Clay Shaw at his home multiple times, and they were always trying to convict him for being involved in the Kennedy murder,
Uh-huh.
and he spent his whole life, defending himself. But you know, but um, after the Clay Shaw trial had ended, um, Harry Connick Sr., who's Harry Connick Jr.'s father,
Obviously,
was
yeah.
running for district attorney. And he actually reached out to the captains of the Gay Mardi Gras Krewe and asked if he could come and speak. And one of the things that he proposed is that uh, if he became district attorney, the raids would stop at the gay bars.
Hmm.
So, needless to say, um, Harry Connick did okay, but it
Uh-huh.
was residents of the French Quarter that put him over the top and, made him district attorney. And he was district attorney here for a good 20, 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, and, such a good person. And, that's someone else that you wouldn't think that a district attorney played a role in Gay Mardi Gras, but he really did. And
Yeah.
there have been other people, throughout the years that have done a lot, but, there's in making the costumes, they, are incredibly elaborate. They're 8 to 10 feet tall,
Mm-hmm.
uh, a good 10 to 12 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I was royalty, one time my train was 17 feet only because the royalty before had a 16-foot train. And then a few years later, my train ended up being 20 feet, for the
God.
same reason, wanting to have a long train when I was Queen of Petronius for the 50th anniversary. So,
Incredible.
so it was, you know, it's a lot. There's an art form in, making these costumes
Mm-hmm.
that, developed by some pretty amazing people. So within Gay Mardi Gras, there are a lot of the different captains and the creative people that are behind it. In the crew of Amun Ra, um, Mike Moreau, also known as Opal Masters,
Mhm.
um, has been with the crew since its founding in 1963. I mean,
Mhm.
it's pretty amazing to have a member all those years. I mean,
Right.
I've been part of three different crews, and there's an extreme burnout factor that happens because it requires a lot of time. You're fundraising. you
Mhm.
know the balls cost between 30 to 40,000 to produce. um,
God.
Dues pays about a third of that, and the rest of it is all done through fundraising throughout the course of the year.
Mhm.
And so that means you have to have like 10 fundraisers a year in order to
Yeah.
come up with money, in order to do it. You sell ads in the program, you know, sell sponsorships, you do whatever you can to make the dollars come in.
Mhm.
And, so when you're captain of the crew or president of the crew, you're, you know, it's like a part-time job.
Mhm.
Sometimes as the ball gets closer, it becomes full-time.
Yeah.
And, but where the art comes in is making the frames or the wire work that's done on the costumes um, is really something that's becoming a lost art that people don't know how to do anymore.
Mhm.
There are tricks and things that we use, today that in, you know, in the days gone by they didn't use, like we use gorilla tape and, hose clamps now, whereas
Yeah.
what they would use is take strips of fabric, soak them in Elmer's glue in order to, create all your heavier joints.
Uh-huh.
You um, when I was king on my train, I had close to 300 appliques because I wanted my train to look like a Persian rug since I
Mm.
was Alexander. So
Ooh.
took the design of the rug and did what every gay boy does and turned it into a sequined uh, Persian rug.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
So you know there when I first joined the crew of Arminius, there were actually these two guys, and you know one of them actually was named Ernie, and the other one, for the life of me, I can't remember his real name because we always refer to him as Bert and Ernie, and they almost look like twins. And they were the applique gurus. Within the crew, a lot of the old members had these skills that they passed on. Like, and I was fortunate enough to, spend some time doing that with them and learning the technique. And
Mhm.
because I know you think it sounds easy, gluing some sequins on a piece of paper, but there's definitely a technique to it.
Oh, for
And
sure. And it's time consuming because look how small sequins are.
exactly. And even though they're on a rope,
Right.
that it still takes a lot to do it. So, there are all those things that, you know, I don't want to get lost.
Mhm.
Um, but also, I don't want to be captain of an organization for life. I really want to encourage younger people um, on how to do this, teach them how to do it so
Mhm.
that these things can go on, and um, life is a lot different now than it was, like I wasn't in the truly repressed area. I was in what we can refer to as the awakening period,
Mhm.
whereas now, being gay is so not an issue. I mean, seeing, like on TV, mainstream, um, you know, gay characters, you know, gay embrace, gay
Hmm.
sex, you
Hmm.
know, on TV. I mean, I never thought that would happen. I mean, I never thought that gay marriage would ever be a reality, you know, and, you know, or, adoption or any of the things that are, going on at this point in time.
Well, and once again, to be clear, in the wider culture of America, yes, there is a lot more gay representation now than there ever was. But and especially in places like the Bible Belt and in the South, there is still, attempts to roll things back, to discriminate, everything like that. Um, but thankfully we have had crews like the Gay Mardi Gras cruise that, in spite of all of that, march forward, proudly proclaiming that we are who we are.
And, part of Mardi Gras Day is everyone wants to go to the Bourbon Street Awards. And at the Bourbon Street Awards, they'll bring a lot of the costumes from the gay balls there. And
Mm.
and that's where all those big, beautiful costumes come from.
Mm.
And, you know, there are gay balls, throughout the South. There's the Crew of Apollo in Birmingham. There's Crew
Mm-hmm.
of Apollo in Lafayette, Baton Rouge,
Mm-hmm.
Houston, Dallas, all have gay crews.
Right.
So it it is kind of a unifying, element um, of gay life. But you're right. I mean, even here, living in New Orleans, that has such a laissez-faire attitude, towards gay life. Uh, I would say during the past couple of months, you know, walking down the street, I'm called a faggot. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so it's still there.
Yeah.
I think prejudice, unfortunately, you know, whether it's black, white, gay,
Mm-hmm.
straight, whatever it may be, I think it's going to be a long time before, you know, we see the end of that. And I'm really hopeful that, the people of like your generation,
Mm-hmm.
um, all those things are such a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it comes down to that's what everyone is, and
Mm-hmm.
that to me is like so refreshing and gives me so much hope, for the future. Um, so I think it's time to start investing in gay nursing homes and overseas
Yes.
complexes.
Yes.
Even if we have to do it in rural Mississippi, we can do it in your backwoods.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, we'll have like a whole Golden Girls situation going on, just like mass Golden Girls. Not, every we'll have like four separate homes, one for the Dorothys, one for the, Sophias, one for the Roses, and one for the Blanches, you
But
know.
I think, we would need to have a really large space for the Blanches,
Yes.
since everyone wants to, you know, be as in demand as Blanche was.
Absolutely. Well, and lots of room for activity because, Blanche was very active.
Hmm.
So why do you think that Gay Mardi Gras has retained its resilience through, hurricanes, sociopolitical upheaval, a pandemic, and why do you think it is so important to keep the the torch passing on?
Well, in Mardi Gras in general, there for like even the straight crews, there are so many different crews of so many different origins.
Mm-hmm.
In the black world, there's the crew of Illinois that
Oh,
is uh, it's a massive black debutante ball, and I
mm-hmm.
mean it is the thing of the season. You know, um, there are all different kinds of crews that are based upon whether what is common factors, neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, women getting together, you know, all those different things. But to me, since the whole thing is so vast, um, I think that you know, I love the fact that each one of those organizations has a different aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Crew of Muses is a woman's crew. They throw decorated shoes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it also has a very political satire feel to it. You know, and the gay balls started out, you know, it wasn't that, you know, we're going to emulate a straight ball, which if you've ever gone to a straight ball, it's really boring.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of pomp and circumstance, but you know, you you know, it's one of those times where you wish you had a bottle of poppers in order to keep you going. So boring. Um, but they, um, you know, gay balls were always done as a form of satire,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, poking fun at the tradition, you know, of the straight balls, but also, you know, being gay Mardi Gras royalty is right up there, you know, with getting married because it's a big event. It costs you a lot of money to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, by the time you get through with your costume, the contributions to the organization, you know, and it's not just 1 year, it's years leading up to that so
Mm-hmm.
that you're considered. And, you know, it's a lot of hard work. And, you know, to me, it was like, uh, before gay marriage became legal, it was as close as you're going to get,
Yeah.
you know, to gay wedding or, you know, um, when I was royalty, I mean, I had 60 guests there at the ball that were all, you know, friends of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it was a big deal. And that was, you know, 6 months after Hurricane Katrina hit. So it, it, it had a way, you know, why we thought at that point in time that that ball was important
Mm-hmm.
was, you know, we'd been through such a hardship that everyone needed
Mm-hmm.
something good in their life, something pretty, something fun.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and this year, you know, I'm captain of the crew of Amun Ra. And usually, you know, our balls have over 1,000 guests. We do them at the St. Bernard Civic Center. Uh, you know, there's a big production to it. And, you know, and with the crew of Amun Ra in all of their 56 years, or
Mm-hmm.
actually, this is the 56th year,
Mm-hmm.
um, they've always had a Mardi Gras ball. So they want to have the contiguous presentation. So we're doing a much more scaled back, small event in a tiny little theater called the Zeitgeist, and it's going to be May 22nd,
Mm-hmm.
and it is by invitation only, and you know we're going to have only 60 seats versus, you know, at the St. Bernard Civic Center, you know, I think at capacity it can seat 10,000, you know.
Mm.
So
Jesus.
we don't have that option, but we are going to record it. It will be on record. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be a nice little event, and that's what we'll do. And it's and it'll be fun that you'll be able to be there. The only thing is, it's like
Yes.
you'll be seeing like I don't know, the coming attractions of a gay ball.
Yes, audience, for everyone out there, I actually was very lucky enough to receive an invitation to this year's Crew of Amun Ra Ball. It will be my first Mardi Gras ball of my life. And of course, as Bill has told me, it's don't, you know, it's so scaled back that, you know, I'm kind of getting like a diet version of a gay Mardi Gras ball, but you know, it's still a ball nonetheless, and it's still a black tie affair, which, you know, your friendly neighborhood host loves the idea of a black tie affair.
Well, you know, and the reason why you have the ticket is uh, because of a contribution from the Laurel Society for the preservation of Gay Mardi Gras.
Really?
Yes. And I think you know who that is, but it's
Yes.
someone who likes to keep their participation
Oh.
and philanthropy on the down low.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Whenever you said the title, I for a second there I really thought that was a thing. But that's Dumbledore, audience. The Laurel Society for the Preservation of Gay Mardi Gras is also Dumbledore. They go by multiple names, but you will never know who they truly are. Um,
And it's someone who is like been part of, Gay Mardi Gras for quite a few years.
mhm,
We were introduced through uh, someone who, after Hurricane Katrina, my uh, since I was a costumer, like I knew how to, you know, cut my clothes, do all that,
mhm,
make the train. That wasn't really an issue.
mhm,
Um, I put together my back piece, which was okay,
mhm.
you know, um, but I purchased about 12 pounds of feathers. And, you know, and you have to realize how extreme that was because on an average costume, you might use 2 pounds, 2.5 if you're being excessive. Uh, so a friend of the captain's who turned out to be a friend of our friend,
Mm,
uh, came over, and his name is Wally McLaughlin,
mhm.
and Wally had been captain of various crews and was a very, very talented costume designer and had mad, execution skills.
Mhm.
And uh, so he came over to help feather my costume, and he wasn't even a part of the crew that I belonged to.
Mhm.
And so within his mind, I'm sure he thought he was coming over for 2 hours. And he came over and said, I'm really concerned that once we get all the weight on this, we need a little more support. So he reworked all my support, spent about 2 days feathering my costume, which, is taking these 30-inch ostrich plumes and
Yeah.
putting them all, arranging them like flowers into the whole costume.
Yeah.
And I felt I looked beautiful and regal, and it was all thanks to Wally McLaughlin.
Mhm.
And I tell this story in the documentary that you saw, The Sons of Tennessee Williams.
Which, audience, please, if you have an opportunity, please go watch that documentary. It is really enlightening,
And it's available
illuminating.
on Amazon Prime, or I think it was even on Netflix for a while.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's very readily available. But um, you know, after that period, I wanted to do something nice for Wally. He wouldn't take any money from me. He wouldn't even go out to dinner at someplace wonderful. He said, "No, this is just what we do. We help one another out, because all the crews support one another.
Mhm.
If you go to one of our functions, there are always people from all the other Mardi Gras crews.
Mhm.
And it's part of what's, been done, and the wonderful part of it. And so at that point in time, the crew of Petronius had very few members. They were down to 8 members.
Mhm.
I said, well, here, what I'll do is I'll become a member. And then Wally talks me into, well, why don't you be captain and I'll be president? And I'll help you with all the wire work, all the, for all the costumes, and, we'll work
Mhm.
on that together.
Mhm.
Well, within months, Wally was diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Mm.
And suddenly, he's getting worse and worse, and it's October. And I just have to punt with the knowledge that I have. And I start making costumes, wire work in my bedroom.
Mhm.
At one point in time, the wire work was too big. I had to pass it over the fence of a next door neighbor in order to get it out.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
it's like crazy stuff like that. But we got our ball together, and that was my first ball, and it was the first time that I ever went in drag.
Hmm.
Um, the crew of Petronius, traditionally the captain, always showed up in drag.
Hmm.
And as we talked about, I've done a little bit of therapy through my life, and it took a lot of therapy for me to be comfortable with being a gay man who, is attracted to other men,
Hmm.
and you know may have some feminine attributes about me, although playing football I think is my butch card. um
100%. 100%. And you can keep that until the day you die. Absolutely.
exactly. I still have my leather athletic jacket from school, from
Mm.
college, you know. uh anyway, so we got the ball on, and I, in all of the crew, in the times that I'd been in balls before, even though I would have crazy wigs and outrageous makeup, I was still always a male character
Hmm.
previous to this.
Hmm.
And so I decided I was going to surprise everyone and show up in drag. And my costume, one of the marching groups in Mardi Gras bands, was from Chalmette, and they were called the Chalmette Strutters.
Hmm.
Well, they're kind of have this Indian themed costumes, and they were everything from 6 to 8 year olds, up
Hmm.
to people in their 20s.
Hmm.
And originally, to be a Chalmette Strutter, you had to hold some type of pageant title.
Hmm.
Well, that changed over the years, and the girls got a little portly. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
So, so me showing up as a Chalmette Strutter, but they also always wore um, the cheerleader boots.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, what I came up for my original drag name was Shamilla DeVille. You
Hmm.
know, kind of a version of Chalmette crossed with Camilla DeVille. Like
Hmm.
that was my aim. But it turned out to be so difficult for people to say that at one point, when I had ordered a bunch of boots in a lot of colors, and they were delivered to a friend's place of
Hmm.
business, and he said, the box is the size of a washing machine. What do you have in it? And I said, oh, it's just some boots.
Oh my God.
And he goes, well, how many pair did you buy? And I said, well, I had 6 or 8 pairs, something like that. They were
Oh my
probably 9 or 10.
God. Oh my God.
And the reason why I bought them is I have big feet.
Hmm.
It's hard to find size 15 women's shoes,
Hmm.
but the boots were plentiful, and they were $30 a pair. So not only were they
No
plentiful, but they were
brainer.
economical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so he said at that point in time that, I should be known as Bootsy DeVille. And I, you know, what was really funny is one of my major clients that I was doing business with, her grandchildren called her Bootsy.
Hmm.
So I did not want to use that name. I said, I can't do that. If she ever finds out, she'll think I'm mocking her,
Oh my
you know?
God.
And so anyway, I ended up having a conversation and told her the story. And she says, oh, I'm not offended at all. And that's how Bootsy DeVille was born. And so I always appear in boots.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
you know, once in a while I'll do a show here or there, but mainly it's for charity. Um, and we'll show up at the ball in drag. So you will see me in drag.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited to meet Bootsy. I've met Bill now. I'm very excited to meet Bootsy. Um, quite an experience. Actually, it's funny, Mark Zuckerberg knows everything because recently, or rather, About an hour after you and I had spoken on the phone last week, Bootsy DeVille was a suggested friend for me on Facebook, and I was just like, "Oh my God, wow." The NSA just knows too much.
I know it's kind of crazy the way that is, like uh how that happens, but it's also like ad things. I've
Mhm,
been trying to send my great nieces and nephews a little something every month,
mhm,
you know, since they've been locked down for COVID.
mhm.
And I got this thing for, Cape Cod saltwater taffy that was from, of all places, Provincetown.
Oh my God.
And so it's one of the things I sent them. So yeah, it is amazing how, you know, Big Brother is watching us and can manipulate our dollars. Because of
Exactly.
course I had to buy it.
No, of course. Well, no, yeah. The minute you saw it, you're like, yes, click. Um,
So there are some gay boys or lesbians in Provincetown that are making saltwater taffy. So if you want to support the gay people of Provincetown, Massachusetts, buy their saltwater taffy.
please, they don't have, but look, whenever the town has to shut down for the winter, what will those gays and lesbians do unless you don't supply them with some saltwater taffy? I mean, come on now. It's got Cape Cod in the name. Don't you like it? Don't you love it?
Well, and a taffy pull, it's almost as much fun as other things that we pull.
Right, pulling the padge, that's taffy pulling the padge. There we go. But Bill, we have come to the end of the episode. So, I have to ask you like I ask all of my other guests, even though you seem pretty well adjusted and it doesn't seem like you had a lot of childhood trauma whenever it came to your sexuality. If you could go back in time and give your childhood self any words of comfort or wisdom, what would they be?
This is something right out of RuPaul's Drag Race, where they always do this to the final four. Uh, um, I think the thing to do is, like, keep being creative, figure out who you are and don't be ashamed of it,
Mm,
and, you know, in today's generation, that's so much easier than it was in mine. But, maybe I did that by getting involved in theater, getting involved in interior design,
mhm,
working in areas that were very gay friendly,
mhm.
you know, um, and that's how I got through it,
Mm.
and it's it's easier now because you see so many gay role models on television and films, and and different celebrities that are gay,
Mhm.
so it's easier. But I would have just said, you know find your path and follow it.
Yeah.
It's about the best thing to do.
Well, Bill, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I can't wait to meet you in person. But until that time, right before we go, do you have any shout outs, promotions or philanthropic opportunities that my audience needs to know about? I know that the crew of Amun Ra actually participates in local charities. So if you want to name some of those, go right on ahead.
Well, the next big thing for the crew, I'm looking at my calendar as we speak, uh, will be May 1st. We're doing a fundraiser at Grand Prix, and it will be surrounded around the Kentucky Derby.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll even have a Kentucky Derby horse race, and there'll be different stick ponies that will be all decorated up that you can buy for either yourself to ride around the house, or to give to some loved ones who really need a stick pony.
Mm-hmm.
So that will be May 1st. And the Crew of Amun Ra is a 501c3. charity. So you can always go to the Mr. Krewe of Amun-Ra website. You can donate. We really appreciate it. And what we do is we support different charities within the community, whether it's uh, the Gay AIDS Task Force, Food for Friends, the St. Anna's Food Bank, uh, the New Orleans School for the Arts, their scholarship fund,
Mhm.
PFLAG, their scholarship fund. Uh, you know, there are all these things within the community that we try and support and help out. And at the same time, we continue the traditions of Gay Mardi Gras and, and teach the art form that's involved in it.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill. And we will see you again very soon
On the 22nd.
on the 22nd.